Hey everybody, welcome back to another fun and exciting Algebra 1 class. Today's lesson we're in 3.2. We're going to be talking about the x and the y intercept. What in the world is an intercept? Well, easiest way for me to explain it would be it's where it crosses that line. So the x-intercept is where it crosses the x line. Remember, the x line is the horizontal line. The y-intercept would be where it crosses that y line, which is the vertical line. So wherever your line, so your line is, kind of going at an angle possibly, and so wherever it crosses the x and wherever it crosses the y, it's called the intercept. So every line basically has an x-intercept and a y-intercept. There are some lines, if your line is perpendicular to the x line or parallel to the y line, then it would not have an intercept with the y-axis. And then same thing if your line is a horizontal line, but it's maybe up a little bit from the x line, then it would not cross the x line. So you could have that potentially, but other than that, every line with any sort of a slope other than 0 or what we call undefined is going to cross the x and the y axis. So they're going to have a point of intersection. That is called the intercept. All right. You're in your book. We're on page number 85. So jump over there, page 85. So you have a picture here of this purple color. It's not a great color. You can't really see it that well. But this purple color here is 0, 6. So in other words, when it crosses the y line, this is the y-intercept. Notice something interesting about that. 0 is always going to be the x number because that means you're not moving left or right on the x. So to find the intercept, if we plug 0 in for x, then that's going to give us the y-intercept. Same thing is true on the x line. The x line, here's the intercept, so it's at the number 3, it intersects the x line. Notice that the intersection point for the y is always going to be 0. Why is that? Because it's always we didn't move on the y line. So wherever it crosses the x, that means we didn't move on the y line. So if we plug in for the y, if we plug in 0, it will always kick out the x-intercept. So the intercepts are fairly easy to find. To find the y-intercept, plug in 0 for x. To find the x-intercept, plug in 0 for y. And I know it kind of sounds backwards, but it's not. So x-intercept, 0 for y, y-intercept, 0 for x. And when you sub that in, it will kick out, it will give you the equation, will give you the other value that you're looking for. Okay, so that's the x and the y intercept. Go ahead and turn over to page number 86. There's this thing called standard form that we need to go through. What is standard form? Well, you're going to learn a couple different formats to put these types of equations in. One of them is called standard form. We will also learn what's called y-intercept form, but this one right now that we're learning is called standard form. So go ahead, look down in your book there. There are 4 requirements, and these are fairly important requirements. So I would highlight these in your book, mark these in your book, write these in your notes, whatever. So number 1, both variable terms should be on the left, and the constant term should be on the right. What does that mean? Well, what's a variable term? In other words, the x and the y should be on the left, and sorry, I'm backwards here. So it should be on the left, okay? And then the constant term, which is the number term, should be on the right, okay? Number 2, the constants in the equation a, b, and c should not be fractions or decimals. So all of your numbers should all be whole numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 20, 50, 70, not 3/4 We saw that in the last lesson where we had an x was like a 2/3 x. Well, that was not in standard form, and that's okay. Standard form is just that. It's just a standard form. It doesn't have to be in standard form, but if the question ever says put this in standard form, then we would have had to have dealt with that fraction. We didn't have to deal with the fraction because the question did not ask us to put it in standard form. When it does, then we have to make sure that we're paying attention to these rules. Number 3, there should not be any common factors shared by the three constants. In other words, we need to pull out any common factors. We haven't done factoring yet, but I'll show you how this works. It's not super hard, but we have to see, okay, is there anything common? Does any number share, like a 2, for example? If that happens, we got to take that 2 out of there. Again, I'll show you what that means in just a second. And then the last one, the coefficient a must be positive. In other words, it can't start with a negative. Okay, so let me show you this here. So here is standard form. And so the different things that we talked about would be that the x and the y are on the left-hand side. Okay, the a is positive. Now, if it doesn't have a sign, then it means it's positive. This, if you have this, that is not standard form. Okay. The other thing is that there's no fraction. So if we had a 1/2 a, then that would not be in standard form. Okay. So let's go through some of these. All right. So here's one right here underneath this. Is this in standard form? The answer is no, because we have a 3x on the wrong side of the equal sign. The a and the x have to be on the other side of the equal sign. It has to be right here. Okay. So how are we going to deal with this? What are we going to do? We have to take this to the other side in order to solve this. That's not that hard. We know how to do that. How do we take that to the other side? Okay. I was going to get rid of that. There we go. So all we have to do is add 3x to this side. And if we do it to this side, then we also have to do it to this side. So we have to add 3x over here. That cancels. We know how to solve equations, right? So what do you end up with over here? You end up with 3x plus y equals 5. Now, I didn't write plus 5 here. We don't need to, but we could. I didn't write plus 3a right there. I didn't need to, but we could. Okay, so there's your solution. 3x plus y equals 5. This is now in standard form. Now, you might be thinking, I want to solve that, right? Like, no, because the question only asked us to put it in standard form. We did what the question asked for us to do. Sometimes in algebra, you're not going to get to a solution. It's not going to be like, oh, x equals 5. In this one, we don't even know because we can't solve it because we have two variables. We could put it on a graph, but we can't solve this one with two variables. All right, let's look at this next one. All right, 1/2 x plus y equals 5. Well, what's wrong with it? Let's start with that. Well, if we go back here, what were some of the rules? We could not have a fraction for a. Notice this has a fraction for a because this is the a, this is the b, and this is the c. Notice that if we write these out, a is 1/2, b is nothing. No, b would be 1. Remember, the number always in front of a variable is always the number 1. Okay, if it's a 0, then that means that it zeroes out because anything multiplied by 0 gives you 0. So it has to be a 1. 1 is the multiplication identity. And so if we want identity, if we want y to equal y, then it has to be a 1. It cannot be a 0. 0 would make the y be 0. 1 makes the y stay itself, whatever that is. Okay, and we don't know what it is because all we know that is y right now is a variable. And then the c would be 5. Okay, so right now we have a problem, and that problem is that we have a fraction for one of our a, b, or c. Okay, You might say, well, how do I fix that? Do you remember the lesson that we taught back in chapter 1 about eliminating fractions in an equation? Okay, we found the LCD, least common denominator, and that is 2 in this case. So we're going to multiply everything by 2, and that's going to eliminate our fraction. Okay, 2 over 1 here. To do this is 1, cancel out. And so this is going to be x, or 1x, plus 2 times 1 is 2y, equals 5 times 2 is 10. So this is now in standard form. Because the a, okay, you might say there is no a. Yes, there is. A is 1, B is 2, and C is 10. Okay, and that 10 is positive and a whole number. The B is positive and a whole number, and the A is positive and a whole number. So we're in good shape. So that is the answer for that one. 1x, or just x, plus 2y equals 10. All right, next one. What's wrong with this one? You might say, I don't see anything wrong with that one. Remember back to, let me bring this up. So number 3 right here says, there should not be any common factor shared by the 3 constants. So if we go back here, notice that 4, 6, and 12 have a common factor, and that common factor is 2. If that's the case, we need to divide everything by 2. And all this is doing is simplifying this. Okay? So that's going to cancel that, and we're going to get 2x. We're going to cancel this, and we're going to get 3, and then, 3 plus 3y. And we're going to cancel this, and we're going to get 6. Now we are in standard form. So now we're ready to go with that one. That one's probably the trickiest one. You haven't learned how to factor yet, so that one's a little bit of a difficult one. But all you do is find the common denominator, or excuse me, the common factor, and then you just divide by that common factor. Okay. All right, the last one, we have a problem right here. A is not positive. A is negative. So what do we do in this case? Easiest way to do this is to multiply everything by -1. If we multiply everything by -1, it will, what that does is it changes all the signs for us. -1 times -7 is 7x, plus -1 times 1y is going to give us a -y. So I can go back and change that. Equals a -4. -4. We are now in standard form. Okay. So what are our answers here? So this is our A. Our A is 7. Our B is -1. And then our C is -4. And these are all important. This is going to be important later as we continue to do these, that you know what A is, you know what B is, and you know what C is. Okay? The only one that has to be positive is the first one. All 3 of them have to be whole numbers. All right, that was this one here where we had a fraction right here. All of them have to be whole numbers, not just one, not just the A. Just the A has to be positive. See, in this case, both B and C are both negative, and that's okay. Here, we had to factor out the common factor, and then on this first one, we had to take the x to the other side, because it has to be x, y, and then the constant on the other side. All right, let's go ahead and do one more thing. What we're going to do now is, remember what I told you is we can graph these based on the intercepts. This kind of like switch gears back to the intercepts. X-intercept and Y-intercept. So if we can find the X-intercept, let me write that up here. X-intercept and the Y-intercept. If we can find both of those, then we can graph this. Do you remember how to find the y-intercept? Or excuse me, the x-intercept. We substitute in 0 for our y. Okay? So let's do that. x plus 3 times 0 equals 6. X plus 0, or just x, equals 6. So there is our y-intercept, and that is our x equals 6 and our y equals 0. Because that's what we subbed in. We subbed in our y right there. Okay. Now we can do the same thing with our y-intercept by subbing in a 0 instead of our, let me change the colors here real quick. We're going to sub in a 0 instead of our x. So this one's going to be a 0, comma, and then we'll have something. And so we'll have a 0 here plus 3y equals 6. We can get rid of that because it's a 0 out there. It doesn't matter. Divide both sides by 3. Y equals 2. And so our intercept is 0, 2. So these are our two intercepts. Our x-intercept was 6, 0, and our y-intercept was 0, 2. So let's graph both of those. As soon as we graph both of those, we have a solution. We have we can graph it. So last lesson, we learned how to graph from a chart. This lesson, we're learning how to graph from intercepts. So x-intercept is 6, 0. So we'll come back over here and we'll find 6, 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 right here, and 0. So in other words, we don't move off of this line right here. Okay. All right. And then the other one is going to be 0, 2. So this is our y-intercept. So we're not moving on the x, but we're moving up 2 on the y. 1, 2. So right there. And there's our 2 points. And with 2 points, we can draw a line. So I'm not drawing a great line, you know, it's horrible looking, but I could draw like a fancy line. So this will be a little bit harder, but sometimes I don't get them right on, and that one's not perfect, but that gives you an idea. Okay, so we drew our line. Now you might say, I want to check and make sure that this thing is actually legit. Like, did we really get what we were supposed to get? Well, what I would do is I would find another one that looks like it kind of touches, like this one right here, and it might not be spot on, but what point is that? 1, 2, 3, 3, 1. So we're gonna test 3, 1. How do you test 3, 1? Remember last lesson how I showed you check it and see if it works. If it works, then it's on the line. If it doesn't, it's not. So if we come back over here and we test 3, 1, so what's 3, 1? So 3, 1 would be x, y, 3, 1. So our 3 is our x. So now we have 3 plus 3y, which y is 1, and then that equals 6. So 3 plus 3 equals 6, 6 equals 6. That checks. In other words, this point checks. Our line checks. It's just a way that you can test your line to make sure that it is actually on there. So a couple different things there in that lesson with the intercepts, x and y intercept, and then also we did the standard form. What is standard form? Standard form has to check those 4 boxes. Okay, so make sure that you look through that before you say, yes, this is in standard form. If the thing asks you to put it, if the test or the quiz or the book tells you to put it in standard form, make sure that it checks all the boxes. Make sure that the A is positive. Make sure there's no fractions. Make sure there's no factors to pull out. Make sure that the X and the Y are on the left and the constant is on the right, all those things. And then you'll get it into standard form, and then that's your answer. You don't have to solve it any further. If it's asking you for the intercepts, make sure that you plug in 0 for the x if you're looking for the y-intercept, and then 0 for the y if you're looking for the x-intercept. That's all I've got for you. Hope you learned something there. If you missed anything, slide it back, watch it again. We'll see you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.